She remembers seeing Bacha throwing a coat over his hands because she didn't want the kids to see him in handcuffs.
My name is Grant Din. I'm a volunteer with the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. When I was on their staff, I did some research on the Japanese Americans who were detained here on Angel Island during World War II. Even before World War II broke out, there were dossiers being kept on Japanese immigrants who were in this country, both in Hawaii and on the mainland. There were extensive files on a lot of these people. They would track their comings and goings to Japan, their involvement in martial arts even, but also people who taught languages, and even people who had businesses that involved photography, where they might have taken photographs of different aspects of U.S. culture. 78 years ago, after Pearl Harbor had broken out, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which authorized the rounding up of Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans who were citizens into relocation camps. The order itself did not specify any particular group, but the implementation only locked up Japanese Americans. It didn't take in Italian Americans or German Americans or anyone else that the U.S. was at war with.
I'm the granddaughter of the eldest child. My mother was named Fumiko.
So I am the grandson, and my mother is the youngest daughter. I understand when he was in the East Bay, he was doing, peddling.
Because at that time, aliens could not, because he was Japanese and they weren't eligible for citizenship, he wasn't able to buy property, so he mostly sharecropped.
There was a confidential informant who had information that they furnished to the FBI.
They probably were just looking through like a yearbook and found his name listed, and I mean that was the only reason that they had to arrest him.
So after Pearl Harbor, there was immediate arrests throughout both Hawaii and California especially. And people were taken to local jails, LA County Jail and places in Honolulu and elsewhere.
The warrant was issued on the 27th. He was arrested on the 28th. Bachan told the kids to leave the house, and then she was told by the FBI to pack a bag with clothing, personal items.
For Jicha.
Yeah, and then she was putting the razor in the bag, and they snatched it away from her. And then they were handcuffed. He was handcuffed and taken away. And she remembers seeing Bacha throwing a coat over his hands because she didn't want the kids to see him in handcuffs.
So Angel Island was basically a short-term stop for when the people from Hawaii would get off the ship. They would bring them to the island and they'd keep them here until it was time to send a group of them off to the interior of the country. One account we have of a man who came here was Yasutaro Soga. And fortunately, he was a journalist because he kept a lot of detailed notes. And he recalls when he arrived here, I think he came with about 40 or 50 other Japanese from Hawaii. They joined about at least 100 to 150 other Japanese from the West Coast. And he said it was extremely crowded and the odors were pretty strong. And just the fact that 150 to 200 people were in this room, designed really to hold about 60, was pretty overwhelming. He also reported that when he was under detention in Hawaii, from the time he came to Hawaii, detained in Hawaii to being checked in the US, he lost about 20 pounds just through the ordeal. One of the things Soga noticed was all the Chinese writing on the wall, which came from the immigration period when Chinese immigrants were detained here. He reported even when he left his own graffiti behind. So what you see now is rows after rows of triple layer bunk beds that were set up for the immigrants, and 4 or 5 sets of beds, 4 beds across. So you can imagine how crowded it was when maybe 150 to 200 people lived in these 2 rooms. You can see the Chinese writing on the walls that Soga talked about. This is pretty much where they were kept most of the time. They would go down to the mess hall, which is right behind us, about 50 feet away. That's where they took their meals. And there's a small exercise area outside of there where I think they might have had time to walk around. We really think it's important for people to learn the history so they can look at the current issues through that lens, that people were unfairly treated. There was a big push to keep them out even before the war started. So when the war happened, farming groups and other groups saw the opportunity, we can get rid of these competitors once and for all. So people need to keep in mind that treat people fairly. One thing that's important, that even Bay Area people don't even know about the Angel Island history. Many people I've talked to said, oh yeah, I've always wanted to go to Angel Island, but I've never been. And these are Asian Americans sometimes, and sometimes they're ones with ancestors who might have come through here. And so that general history of Angel Island is not that well known. And then the wartime experience is even less known because it's a very small part of the incarceration experience. But when people hear that this building, which was used to house Japanese internees, is still around, and they get excited that it's still here, because most of the sites where Japanese were rounded up and kept are you can no longer see anything. There might be a plaque at Tanforan Shopping Center, for example, because there was a racetrack where Japanese were held there. But to have the whole building available for people to walk through where people were kept here, or sometimes in many cases we've met people whose ancestors were kept here. It's really important for them to know about that.